First off, thanks everyone for joining us. I wanted to get started here with the fact that you probably have never heard of Mastronardi Foods before, but I can almost guarantee you that you've eaten some of their products and produce. So, Josh, can you give a little background on Mastronardi?
Sure. So we're a grower, marketer, and distributor of hothouse product. Primary products are tomatoes, peppers, and cucumbers. We do a little bit in berries, and lettuce is up and coming. We have about 6,000 acres in North America, and we service the top 50 retailers in the United States and in Canada.
Excellent. So, how many folks out there are work for a CPG company, a food company, a beverage company? Nobody. Okay. One of the things we've all been hit with is inflation when we go shopping, and there's a number of drivers that are really impacting the CPG industry. Things like changing consumer demand drivers, like in terms of looking for sustainable food products or local food products. There's been a lot of supply chain disruption. There's been enormous, I would say, kind of volatility around brand loyalty. Because of the pandemic, roughly 60% of people have changed their shopping habits and or the brands that they've typically purchased in the past. So there's all of this pressure kind of going on within CPG. Josh, can you kind of describe some of the complexities and volatility that you have to deal with from a produce production perspective?
Sure. So labor is one of our larger driving factors of having enough people to pick the crops that are planted. Distribution costs, fuel in terms of logistics, and then SKUs and SKU rationalization is a big driver for us. We use Anaplan to embrace what we call a direct ship process. So we look at customer orders as they fall into our system. We try to identify the orders that we can go direct from the farm to the end customer. That skips a distribution center, that takes out fuel costs. And our goal is to drive our business that way to help reduce some of our inflation costs.
Yeah, and I think, when we've talked before, your business is extremely complicated, just complex from the number of distribution points, the number of SKUs, managing, like you said, the transportation costs. Can you talk a little bit about what was planning like before Anaplan? What was, not to bring back the nightmares, but what was it like?
Sure. So we used a lot of static reports. The problem with static reports is you run the report on Monday, and frankly, the data could be different on Tuesday. And even if it's the data from the past week, because there's transactions that aren't closed, there's transactions that are fixed. So what we've really embraced Anaplan for is live reporting. I think we get an update about every 2 hours from our ERP system for sales and procurement data. We can track sales forecast accuracy on a day-to-day basis. We can track produce or supplier accuracy of how much product we're getting on a day-to-day basis as well. It's critical for us because our shelf life is 7 to 21 days. So if we have more coming at us from our 6,000 acres, let's say from Mexico, we know 5 days in advance, we're going to have to sell more product. Or if we're short, then we have to go purchase a little bit on the outside market to fill our orders where we're going to be short.
Gotcha. And was a lot of that planning in the past before Anaplan done in Excel?
It was done in Excel. It was a lot of big sheets connected, and there was a lot of poor decisions because the week later is when we would say, oh, if we only knew on Wednesday last week to start buying again or to start promoting sales, we could have had a better sell-through or better, or happier customers per se. So.
Yeah, I think, one of the things that fascinated me when we were talking to Josh about the work that they've done is, you mentioned this, the perishability of the product. The complexity that Josh has to deal with is so much greater than typical CPG companies. If I'm selling like a canned food product or a snack product, its shelf life is, 6 months, 12 months, maybe even longer. And so you don't have that complexity. So the model that you have and what you've built is really, really pretty amazing. Kind of speaking of that, Jason, is from kind of a technical perspective, what are some of the things that are unique about what Mastronardi is doing with Anaplan and or things that maybe would not be possible in any other technology versus Anaplan?
Yeah, so I think some of the cool things that we've done is it's kind of been a phased approach and kind of the maturity curve at Mastronardi and how they're using Anaplan. So when we first started out, there were 3 separate models that were kind of taking all of this. So we went from having a sales planning model into a short-term and a long-term demand planning model. We then were able to use hypermodel to combine all of these. So it was a little bit staggered or stagnant, I guess, at the beginning when we had to move data from one model to another. But as soon as we got that hybrid model available, then now all of it is truly connected and really using that kind of connected planning concept. I think a couple other things that kind of stick out is, like Josh was saying, there's kind of growers all over North America. And so as that's happening and as people are planning as well, we have people in the US, in Canada, in Mexico, all using this information in real time. And so using that across a lot of different categories as well to really understand what the business needs. And then the third piece is, again, across categories and kind of understanding how the business works. He has 6,000 acres to play with. And, sometimes what would happen if we did this? What would happen if we did that? And so kind of adding some of the scenario ability in there, if that's even a word, to really kind of play around with that and figure out what do we need to do if we're over on this, under on that, and play around to really find that right mix so that we're not over committing or under committing on any of the categories.
You mentioned the hybrid model. Based on, you and I work on a number of different CPG projects. In terms of the granularity of the data, do you see this as being a fairly complex sort of model?
Yeah, so there's a lot of SKUs. So that is definitely one of the complexities. Some of the other complexities is when we think about who are we shipping to? Well, we're not shipping to like the parent of the customer. We're shipping to a distribution center for the customer. So that's another kind of caveat there. We also have internal DCs at Mastronardi. And so when you start thinking of all the different dimensions here, we have the actual growers. Then below that, we even go down to the greenhouse level. And we can tell you how many acres there are at any point, what crop they're growing, all sorts of different things like that. So we're really looking at greenhouse level, where it's going to ship in terms of an internal DC, who it's going to ship to in terms of an external DC, what SKU it is. And then depending on what data set it is, we look at most of it in terms of weeks, but then for some of the more immediate stuff, some of it even goes down to a day level. So there's a lot of pretty intense dimensionality that happens within the model.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that has always struck me about Anaplan and the work that, we've done, and not only with Mastronardi, but other companies, is the ability to handle both those direct and indirect customer bases. And so I think that's kind of one of the unique aspects of Anaplan, being able to handle that hybrid distribution model that's pretty common within CPG. Kind of going back now as we understand the complexity of it, how long again have you been running Anaplan?
I think we've had it for 4 years, but really actively getting value out of it as a business probably the past 2.
Gotcha. And so speaking of value, what are some of the value drivers that you've seen coming out of using Anaplan?
So automated reporting, that's like a huge one. So our short-term forecasts, we used to have someone spend 4 hours on Thursday afternoon uploading new forecasts for about, I would say, close to 1,000 to 2,000, depending on the time of the year, crop rows. So that's 100% automated now. And, that's a value add. The other things is easy reporting, easy access. So the UX gives a dashboard. The category planner can literally click on cucumbers and see, hey, this is how my sell-through was. This is how my percent from inventory was. This is how, I performed last week as a category. The one thing Jason didn't mention, the maturity there has been nice too. We continue to get more value out of it because we realize, hey, we need an MRP system for packaging. Well, we need the sales forecast. Oh, the sales forecast is already in Anaplan. Let's just build it in Anaplan. So you take the bomb, you blow it out, and then you have an MRP system for packaging. And honestly, the amount of effort was not, in my opinion, not crazy, but he might tell you otherwise. But it's there, it's easy at that point because you kind of have the things aligned where you need it to be. So I do believe that the biggest value is the reporting being, and it's what we're trying to do is one place of the truth. So, you can have a report that's an Excel report over here, and then you have Anaplan, and then you might have another function like Power BI, but scrap the other two and let's just use it for one place of the truth.
Makes sense. What are some of the different business functions that you have running within the Anaplan model and models?
Yep. So we do our S&OP process. So sales and supply planning. Those are the two big drivers. We have operational capacity, which is underutilized at this point. We need to work on our DC allocation, which is what customers point to what of our MPL DCs. And then we have packaging. We have a demand for packaging, and we actually have a demand for seeds because we buy a lot of seeds as well. So those are and then category management.
Gotcha. So truly embrace the whole kind of connected planning sort of mantra.
Correct. We're kind of different where, a lot of people come in and they do finance and maybe sales planning. We did supply planning. Like we're that third tier that they showed this morning. Yeah. We're supply planning. That's where we started, and we're kind of going the other direction where finance is getting more involved, sales is getting more involved at this point.
Gotcha. Where do you see some of those, kind of models then going down the road? Do you have a roadmap kind of thinking?
Yeah, I think we want to automate vital signs, which is our FP&A reporting. That's kind of the current ask. The data's there. It's pretty much clean. We want to start looking at margins and then do more scenario planning. So, our sales team would prefer 100,000 cases a week of Campari tomatoes every week of the year, which can be virtually impossible because you're dealing with agriculture. But we can rotate crops. We can plant crops to start and stop at certain times using the scenario tool. So our goal is to drive more value into that.
Gotcha. So it's really kind of enabled then you to operate a more agile sort of business.
Correct.
Have you used it? You mentioned sort of reducing like transportation costs. Is that helping you drive kind of that sustainability message, reducing carbon footprint? Is there kind of an angle there as well?
So our angle is we look at two-touch transfers, which means it went to a building and then went to another building before going to a customer. So how can we drive efficiencies there and then direct to customer? Not necessarily looking at, cost of trucks, routes, and lanes. That's we use a different system for that. But, our goal is as a supply chain department to say, okay, what's our easiest or cheapest route to get it from the grower to the customer? Obviously, grower direct to customer is cheapest. And if we have to touch a building, only touch one more building, meaning a distribution center for Mastronardi.
So you're doing all that planning and kind of scenarios and optimization within Anaplan.
We're using the tools to see where we're not performing. Yep. And we're still working on 100% rolling that planning into the system.
Gotcha. Jason, just from like an implementation sort of this, what was kind of the timing of some of the length of duration of kind of getting those different capabilities built out?
Yeah, so it's a little challenging, I'd say, to answer because there's a lot of different pieces. Yeah. I'd say kind of in our current state, typically, Josh and his team will come to us with some kind of request to say, here's a report that somebody is still doing manually or something like that, or here's a feature that we really want to add that's going to add value to our business. And so typically for that, we'll understand what the requirement is. And I'd say in general, those things probably get turned around in maybe a week and a half, 2 weeks, somewhere in there. And then they start getting used a little bit, and then we make a couple tweaks to them and different things like that. So typically we're turning those things around in a matter of from inception of the idea to completion with modifications and trying to make it exactly what the end user wants within a matter of a couple weeks. I would say when we took over this implementation, we did a lot of different things. I'd say there were a few things that were probably built not using some of the best practices. And so we kind of took a look at a lot of that and helped kind of speed that up, knowing that, again, the dimensions are very large in this. And in addition to that, we have these big integrations that are running every couple hours. And so if we're not building this thing in an optimized way, we're going to have some pretty big issues. And so I'd say one of the other cool things is that when we did also get the hyper model available, then we've also been utilizing the model optimizations, which some people might have gone to that training yesterday that Rob Marshall did. And so we've been, using the Anaplan team to go through and do some of those additional model optimizations and actually getting the results out. And I think we've seen some pretty noticeable impacts from those as well.
Gotcha. I think we still have a little bit of time. You'd mentioned kind of this single source of truth or whatnot. I don't know if this is a Josh or Jason question, but can you talk a little bit about the integrations? Like, where are you pulling data from? And then, like, if you're doing an SNOP, that data is going back, I'm assuming, into some other systems. I don't know.
Yeah, so we have a portal that contains all of our supply data. Yeah. Long-term forecast includes, seed drops, size of the greenhouse, disease pressure, varieties, everything we want to track for every planting of a tomato, pepper, or cucumber. And then we use our ERP system for the transactional data. And then currently right now, our sales forecast is still a push. We just push in a forecast, and then we use some logic in Anaplan to help break that down to customer DC level. So those are the really two main connectors at this point of data. Is a lot of data that comes from our ERP system, and there's a lot of data that comes from our GSP, just because of the size of the business.
Right. And then are you pushing the plans back out?
No, we actually use Anaplan now in our executive S&OP meetings. We full screen. We publish a report every so often, but most time we are using the system. We present using the system. We do turn off updates at times, so we don't have anything lag during that type of meeting. But yeah, we use the system for the views during those calls.
So S&OP isn't like the olden days. Everyone comes in with their own spreadsheets. They're arguing about the numbers. You guys are all live in the solution on the platform.
That's correct.
Presenting S&OP.
Not to mention, somebody could have made a change 5 minutes ago that's reflected in that.
That's awesome.
Yep.
What's kind of the executive team kind of view this? How do they see that? Is that that must be a major change for them, right, compared to the olden days?
Yeah. So they were used to Excel documents, graphs that were maybe not updated, graphs that one of our bigger things is we do kilo checks. So how do you validate your forecast? So on a production side for agriculture, we look at kg per meter squared. So how many kilos per meter squared are you producing? And the system allows us to do that because we have acres and volume. And so we have actually better data, I would say, in the system now because we have an easier way to check it. But before, it was a lot of copy paste. Someone made a mistake. You'd have a huge bar, let's say in November, you'd have all these extra Campari tomatoes, and it wasn't true. So this, we have better data, more real-time data, and it's a better view because you can also turn your time scale. You can open it up, zoom in. We really like that tool. It's really progressed our S&OP meetings. So
awesome.
I would say a couple other things just from looking at some of those S&OP graphs is that I'm sure before there might have been, we look at it 1 month this way and then now something's a different color. Maybe it's harder to understand, like, what am I actually looking at? I think now that it's been standardized, it's always the same color. There's a lot of colors on that graph. And partially that's because we're looking at the different growers from different regions. We're looking at the demand from different regions and things like that. And so a lot of data put together onto one graph that kind of gives you an overall view of what the business looks like for that.
And we archive. We archive every month. Our supply, we archive our sales forecast every week. And so we're a business that changes all the time. We'll have crops that get pulled out because of disease, this or that. And, it always comes back to, well, what was the plan? Because right now it's not a good plan, right? And so we want to go back and say, okay, what was the plan and what happened? Did the sales forecast go up? Did our supply forecast go down? Why do we have such a big mismatch? And we don't store that in Anaplan because it's too expensive. But we pull it out and we have the ability to push it back in and then compare it if we need to. So
there was some general one said, a plan never survives meeting the enemy, right? So now you're able to, plans always change. You're able to do that in agile fashion of mixing it up.
We always say it always looks good in Excel. I mean, it's not Excel anymore, but it always looks good in Excel when you present it, right?
Awesome. Well, did you guys have any kind of closing thoughts or closing? So if anyone has questions, 12's booth is right over there. Please stop by if you want to talk more about this solution or any solution that we've implemented within CPG. And I really appreciate your attendance.